Welcome to another episode of Wise Tech for Wise Money. I'm your host, Gary Wayne, founder of A1 Solutions International. Today, our episode is From Code to Capital, how a developer turned business finance broker is bridging the SME funding gap across 5 countries. David Gelkin is the founder of Station Hill Capital, a business finance brokerage that's helping SMEs access funding across 5 countries. But here's what makes David's story particularly interesting. He's not your typical finance broker. He started as a developer at 19, spent 20 years building businesses in Finland. Now he's back in the UK, combining his technical expertise with financial services while simultaneously raising 50 to 60 million for an aviation roll-up. David, welcome to the show today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you very much indeed.
Before we dive into Station Hill Capital, what are you doing? What you're doing now? Take us back to the beginning.
How far do you want me to go
You
back?
started your entrepreneurial journey at 16.
I did. Yeah, I did. It wasn't an easy journey either. I know you probably wanted to have the amazing journey. It was so easy, so simple, and it just ragged to riches sort of story. But it actually wasn't. My first journey was actually a disaster. So I was 16 years old. I was in Bournemouth at the time, and I was going to the ski slopes that is there in near Herne, and so it used to be there anyway. I don't even know if it's still there even. And so they had like a Dendex, like a rubber mat or like a plastic grass is what we used to practice skiing on, because obviously not a lot of snow in the south of England, those sort of things. So we're practicing doing our skiing and snowboarding. Anyway, I went there. I had it as my hobby, obviously being a bit of a teenager, and so I was there going around, and I had the business idea that some of my friends would like to go to the south of France so that we can go onto some real snow and see some girls and have a little bit of adventure and stuff like that. And so I just sort of talked myself into it, basically, that I had a cousin of mine that could actually drive, and he had a vehicle already, he had like a minibus and those sort of things. And basically what I did is asked him, I said, if I give you some money, would you like to take a bunch of us to France? And he obviously assumed that we've got parental, supervision on that sort of stuff done, but we hadn't at that time, and those sort of things. And I went to the other guys that we have to, because he said to me, how are you going to cover the costs of it? Because of petrol and that sort of stuff. And I said, I hadn't thought about that. Obviously, being 16, you're not really thinking about petrol and holidays, sort of things like that sort of going. So I spoke to the other guys. They said, how much is it going to cost? I said, it's probably going to cost about £200 or something, £150. They'll be there for the weekend, and, it'd be great, going the stuff. And obviously, with no parents involved, we didn't know what it was about. Anyway, managed to get the ski thing sorted out. We actually got to the south of France. There was 5 of us in the end, plus my cousin, who was doing the driver. We went there, all the passports, and all the parents assumed that there was some other adults going with us. Anyhow, after this sort of happened, got back to England, and everyone was all going there. And then the parents actually just went mental. It was like, it wasn't a good scene, because everyone assumed it. There's like, anything could have happened, and blah, 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 and you're so stupid. But the worst case was, is that because it got found out that I'd made a holiday tour and I'd been charging money and made a bit of money myself, there was an actual not estate agent, but the holiday rep that was actually based at the ski centre making holidays. They got pretty pissed off. And so what they were saying then is like, okay, we're going to do this because I wasn't having ABTA registration. I'm like, ABTA registration? I don't even know what ABTA is. I'm 16 years old, calm down sort of thing. They took a court order out because of those sort of things happening, and that I had to cease and desist. And I was like, I'm 16 years old. I took it as a bit of a joke, like you do at those sort of times. My mum and dad got a letter, and they were not happy at all. So basically, my first scenario of trying to get into business was basically a cease and desist order, and almost, a good idea from my dad, basically, and those sort of things. So that's my my big cherry on top of the cake of how I actually become an entrepreneur. You might think, why did I continue? But it was the thrill. Those sort of things that, the vision is how you can get things done. It's not what the means. It's the way they say it. It's like who not how you're going to do it. And we just sort of figured it out. It just sort of came together by itself, to be honest. And that was my big adventure. So I'm not saying everyone else should do that. It's just one of those sort of adventures go along. It's like, that's my origin story.
That's a great story. And were there plenty of girls?
To be honest, yeah. But it got even better as I was going on, because I got quite a good job in the evenings at that point, and so I was able to get a flying school, so because it's quite close to Herne, so I was getting a flying school that was actually learning how to fly an aeroplane, and so that was better for getting the girls rather than going to the ski centre. But that's another story for another day. We'll have a beer over that.
Yeah. Well, what did you learn from that experience?
from having the minibus thing. Actually, it got me excited, to be honest, because I became very popular within my peer group very fast. Because now I was a centre of attention almost, like I was the man or the guy that could make stuff happen. So whether I wasn't the guy that was driving the minibus, I wasn't the guy that had the chalets, I wasn't that, but I was just coordinating. I wasn't doing any of the bookings, I wasn't doing any of that. I was basically the guy that was just connecting the dots. And so that, you know, that's a sort of big epiphany that I got from it, is that I didn't have to know all the details myself or do anything. I could actually make stuff happen that way.
Fantastic. And then at 19, you go into coding.
I did.
That's quite a change. How did that happen?
So basically, I went to like college in Bournemouth and Poole. I went there and I did an IT certificate to try and get that stuff sort of going. Because obviously, after, you know, what do you do, secondary education, etc. And so with that, I was learning about how to do like Perl and those sort of things. I got into a little bit of Java at the time. That was also quite good. And so learning how to program in Java, it gave me a little bit of an like a basis of potentially where my entire future career was going to go to, because knowing how the internet works, because obviously it's quite a long time ago. We're talking like, you know, before the 2000s. You know, the internet was just about, you know, it was all worried about the Y2K sort of virus going to those sort of things. You know, it wasn't where it is like today. And so by doing, you know, like web development and, you know, doing application development, this is where the cusp of like all the big money was, and that's where I want to go to. And so by having a foundation back at an early age, it actually gave me very good stead for that. And so I got into computer science and understanding not just the semantics and the language syntax. It's actually how the systems work. How do you actually make you know, an API? You know, obviously it wasn't, you know, the sort of things there, but how do you make like the API calls? How do you make the, you know, the computers talk to other? How do you actually connect them together? You know, with the network, how's the network wired together? And knowing those fundamentals, that's helped me now to understand the newer technologies, like today, even like with AI, etc., and how the components fit together, because I've had that foundation.
I remember doing computer studies at school, and I'm older than you, when we did it all on a ticker tape.
You are
and
old.
You used to have to put holes. Yeah, I had. And then you had to put holes in the.
Yeah.
You know, the coding was done by like Morse code type thing.
Yeah.
And you had to develop a tape. But
Yeah,
you
green tape
fed
in
into
it. Yeah.
a computer that was as big as my room. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
So when I was
you see where
coding
we are
anyway, it was,
today.
yeah. So when I was coding, it was 3.5-inch floppy disks. They're just I was on the cusp of the 2.5-inch, you know, the big massive ones, and it was going to the 3.5. So that's the sort of when I was getting into it. You know, there was no real memory sticks or anything back then, nothing like that sort of thing. So yeah,
It's
cassette was
amazing
still
when
around.
you think back over your
Yeah.
lifetime.
Yeah,
The
cassette was still
technology
around.
changes and you know what's happened. Tell me about blockchain and cryptocurrency that you got involved in.
Yeah, so with that sort of thing, so I was actually in Malaysia at the time. I was doing some work with a network marketing company to try and drum some stuff up, because obviously back in the day, every network marketing, everybody was into crypto. It was all the big thing, all the big rage, and it was like you didn't know if it was a scam, you didn't know if it was like legit. Everyone was like, you know, Bitcoin wasn't even a thing. Yeah, people knew what Bitcoin was about, but I think at the time it was what, maybe something like less than $100 or something. Like crypto, you know, it was just sort of getting into there. So talking these buzzwords about crypto, go into those. And so for that, so I started, obviously I could talk a little bit, and I've got some ability of being able to, you know, to let's say to speak and, you know, enunciate what I'm about to try and get across to people. And so with those sort of things happening, I was breaking down, how does a blockchain work? Like, how does a Merkle table work? Like, how in simple layman terms, how, you know, you get one transaction, you put a seed to it, you have the other transactions, you create a calculation to get the next part of the block on the chain, and how this all goes together, making it into simple terms that everyone can understand without breaking it down too much. If they ask a technical question, then I can say, well, obviously I can do some development with it, and say, well, we can go to a lighter level and how it's going to be used with, like, you know, different sorts of exchanges, how there would be different between them. But fundamentally, though, the blockchain, people were maybe misinterpreting that crypto, as in a currency, and blockchain were the same thing when there wasn't. And I was explaining to them that blockchain has much more utilitarian uses than a cryptocurrency. A cryptocurrency can still be, I don't know what some of your viewers would be listening to, but it can either work or it can't work. Yeah, Bitcoin at the moment is what, $100 or something, $105, something like that. It's at the moment $105,000. It's doing quite well at the moment. But the blockchain, though, has much more. Like, you could put, say, art on a blockchain. You can put also, we got new businesses that haven't been developed yet will be the next $1 billion businesses because of the blockchain. I'm pretty sure about that. So the blockchain utilization, Web3, and those sort of things going forward, and how AI is going to be interpreting and evaluating those. That's where the future is going to. Whereas crypto, I think that it's there, but it's utilization of the crypto rather than trying to make your big fortunes with it. It's a bit of a bubble at the moment with those things. But that's my understanding. And if I answered your question, that is.
Yeah, no, it's good. So you went to Finland and spent 20 years there. Well, what took you there and what made you stay?
So what took me there? You're going to be like really surprised about this, but I actually went there for a woman. Like for a girl, because obviously in Scandinavia, it's tall, blonde hair, blue eyes. What you got not to think about really. And so I went there for one woman, but that didn't work out. So I actually stayed there a little bit because obviously you don't want to be defeated. You're not going, I'm not going to go there. Sod that. I'm a bit of a man. Don't do it. And in the end, I found another one that was even better. And I thought that's the reason why I stayed there. I didn't plan on being there 20 years. Obviously, I went there, sort of thing. I had a job. I was working at Nokia and those sort of things going around. But finding the actual girl and stuff like that, that's the fundamental there. Obviously, if it comes on a CV or something, obviously I went there for work and for work opportunities. But reality between me and you, don't tell anybody, is because the opportunity is there to be a young guy in Scandinavia at the time when there wasn't so many foreigners there, learning a bit of the lingo, going around. It was epic. It's a bit different nowadays, but back then it was like Shangri-La.
And you, and what happened? I understand you built several enterprises.
I did. Yeah.
Internationally during that time.
Yeah, it was.
Can you share some of those ventures?
I can, because Finland, the language in Finland is Finnish, right? And it's really, really, really difficult. And that's an underestimation that it's really difficult. So the easiest thing for me to do was to start a business, because when you own the business, you don't have to worry about, you can accept the customers or not. Whereas if you want to try and be an employee, you've got to tick lots of boxes. Do you speak the language? Do you do this? Have you got that? It's very difficult. So it was a lot easier for me to actually start a business. And one of my first businesses I started there was actually buying second-hand computers, building them up again, putting some new graphics cards in them, maybe changing the motherboard, some fault finding, having to fix some of that sometimes with a soldering iron, etc. Maybe getting a new case if it's a little bit damaged, polishing up, making it look a bit spiffy. Back in the day, you used to have like DVD drives and those sort of DVD burners, etc. And so changing some of those, putting all the drivers on there, putting an installation of either Linux or Windows, getting it going, and then selling it to the other people that were on my, students or on my age in the actual community I was in. And that's what I was doing. And that was working out quite well. I was getting maybe couple of machines being sold, I wouldn't say every day, but it's like a couple in a week I was able to do that. And then the monitors, but that was back in the day when monitors were massive. So one of the hardest things was actually to get the stuff to me. So in the end it was like, people had to deliver it to me as well, and that's where it's sort of coming from, and then people had to come and collect it, so I was trying to keep it down. But that was where it all started from. It's like, a bit like let's say, I wouldn't say like an half a daily, but it was buying and selling at the end of the day. I was talking the patter, that's what it's about, and then trying to sell the commercial, to people. There was no internet ads or anything that day, so you have to basically write everything on paper and make an ad, and that's what I was doing. I was just saying, my name just got around saying, yeah, Dave can get you a computer, and so that's what it was. And then I got into the role of supporting the machines, so I had that as a service as well. So the machines I sold to people, I was installing, doing upgrades, changing memory, and so those sort of things are happening until there's some sort of money sort of rolling in. So that's how it sort of started in Finland. After that, I then sold that business, sort of gave it away, got a little bit of money at the end. It wasn't big bucks, sort of talking for those. And so I gave that to a friend of mine at the time. And so I don't know what's happened to it now. Maybe it's still working. I have no idea. But it's going for those. And I moved down to the south of Finland because I was in the north in Lapland. And so I moved down to the south in Helsinki. And then from there, it was, I was like finding what to do. I got a job then in IT. Doing coding, and then it was at Nokia. So for that period of then, I wasn't, able to work my own businesses. But then Nokia got purchased by Microsoft. Big disaster at the end of the day. And so what do we want to do? But Nokia was really amazing employer, like really good. They supported their people really well. And so I was able to that point to get a little bit of funding, and we started another company. I did into data recovery, and with that was got really well. I was able, with support of Nokia and that, to get contracts with like Interpol and those sort of things, military contracts, doing actual physical data recovery. So that's like hard drives that have been burned or been smashed up and those sort of things, getting data from those. And so with the Interpol things, it'd be, there's a lot of like, criminality that happens in the middle of nowhere in forests and stuff like that. So they capture the devices, and then we have to do the recoveries for those. So there's like an impartial third-party entity for cases. So it's quite interesting stuff, and that's where I got to. And then I was able to sell that business, and I made a little bit of money, so got rid of a lot of debt and stuff like that sort of things. And then that was about the time, or maybe about a year or so before I then came back to England, and that's where it all came from. But my Finnish story, it was like one step to another. During that time, I was also got to become an actor. So that's again another story of about just being in the right place, right time. So I got an IMDB profile and everything. I've been in, something like 8 or 9 movies and those sort of things going. Literally, it's because you just accept if something comes your way, rather than saying no, I don't know if I can do it. Just say, yeah, let's give it a go. My story about the acting, obviously a little bit off tangent, but I went to the first gig. They said, could you read a script? Like, could you say this? I said, yeah, of course I can. It's English. I'll just be there, just talk. And he said, just be natural, just be yourself, just go there. And I'd never met anybody. It was just, get so great. So I went to this scene anyway, and in the end, it was in a bowling alley, and it was like a full studio. Like, imagine like in Hollywood, there was cameras, there was people going around, and some woman, girl came up to me. She says, "Hi, is there anything you would like specifically that I can get for you?" I don't know why. I was the biggest knob in the world. I don't know. It just went to my head. I said, "I'd like to have green M&Ms." I have no idea why. And this woman took me seriously, and she went off, and I'm like, oh my, why did I even do that? It's like, I don't even, it just sort of came to my head that I thought it'd be a cool thing to say. And anyway, so I'm doing my sort of stuff. And then, lo and behold, maybe about 2 hours later, this girl came back with green M&Ms. I was like, and I was like, and I did that to her, and I was like thinking, I got to be careful what I tell to people. Yeah, obviously just ask for bananas or something like that. But it was like from there, it was because the directors and that they could see that obviously I could do a little bit of my talking and those sort of things. And then from there they gave some recommendations, and that's how basically I got into other things like voice acting. I was the voice for Kia motor cars for a while. And so in Europe, you can see on some of the commercials for the Octavia and those sort of things, I was on there, and I was the voice for Celia Line. So when you're going on the cruise ships, it was my voice on the tannoy advertising. When you went to the airport in Helsinki on Finnair, I was the voice in there saying, "Welcome to Finland for 100-year anniversary," all that sort of stuff going. So it's all a little bit, and that's what I think the entrepreneurialism comes from. If you see an opportunity, the vision is there, just go for it. You don't know where the end's going to be, and that's where it's just taken me all these sort of adventures around. I know it's a bit of a tangent to what you asked, but all that sort of stuff happens.
No, I think it's exciting. I think that's what entrepreneurialism is about.
Yeah.
Taking opportunity. Is your acting career ongoing?
You never really quit being an actor. If obviously got some big James Cameron's listening to this now and he wants me to be on there, I'm available. You got my number, just IMDB me, I'll be there, sort of thing. But otherwise, I'm not actively seeking.
007 is not ruled out.
Yeah, exactly. I can go there, but but at the moment, I'll see if I can put it into my structure, my calendar, and my schedule at the moment.
When we last spoke, you had an interesting perspective on the Nordic economic model. What is your view on that? High social services, high taxation, etc., and how's that influenced you?
I'm going to turn off some of your audience now. The Nordics is great, like the visuals, the people to an extent. They're nice people. They're quite friendly and honest and stuff like that. But then there's the negative side. It's like they are anti-entrepreneur in a big way, and it's this socialism is taking over, and everyone's being supported by the government. So yes, in theory, that's a great idea. Everyone they have a minimum standard of living, but who's paying for that? So the government now, the taxations, so that's why the taxations in those countries have to be so high, is because a lot of the people are not contributing in an active way to the society. And because they're making being an entrepreneur bad or not incentivizing it in any way, people are not trying to be innovative. They're not trying to start those new things and employing people. And that's why I'm seeing it. So now in the Nordic, especially Finland, what I'm hearing about in the news currently, like today, is that basically there's massive unemployment for the under 25s. And you're talking something like 45% unemployment for those people. And that's the future of your country. That's not good. And so if there's no entrepreneurs that are leading that they can get ahead, where are those young people going to go to? You're breeding a whole generation. It could be like a lost generation there. It's terrible. And obviously in Europe, we'd like to say, in England, we'd like to say, oh, Europe's doing bad. But it's not being in the news here at all. Obviously Finland being happy and blah, blah, blah. But it's not, there's a little bit extra under the surface. And that's why I'm seeing it there. And obviously being a foreigner in Finland can be a little bit difficult because obviously the language is very hard. But again, if you come to the UK, we expect people to speak English. And so going to Finland, they expect people to speak Finnish if you're in their culture. And so those sort of things happening, but they're also making it a little bit hard as some sort of extent of trying to integrate. Obviously, if you could speak very good Finnish, they're still not maybe giving the amount of opportunities that could be there, because obviously the populations are quite small and the opportunities they have to give it to people that are locally already based there. So I am seeing that, Finland, like I said, the good old days were there, but at the moment, I think it's the whole of Europe, but it's just not doing so well at the moment. Germany, higher unemployment there also. Inflation's going through. They're seeing a lot of the far right coming up. It's happening in Finland. They've got perussuomalainen, which is like basic Finns. They've got the same sort of things there coming into power. Obviously, they've just now come into NATO, which is like a good thing, obviously, for them. But when it comes to like how the jobs are going and how it's going, it's the economy is not so good. So in that sense, how's England doing? I'm not trying to build up England and stuff, because obviously we've got our own problems here in England, to be honest.
England,
but we'll go on to that subject a bit later.
Going into politics.
Yeah.
If we look at the Labour government,
Yeah.
aren't they doing something similar to the Finland model?
They are doing the playbook like step by step, as if it's actually a guidebook. They're ticking off the boxes. It's not good, because now when they're doing that sort of thing, it just drives innovation and businesses away. And so most of the economy, you could say someone like, I don't know the exact figure, but I'm just guessing it could be as much as say 85 or 90% of any economy, like established economy, it could be based on SMEs, small to medium sized enterprises. And if you're not supporting those small businesses, a couple of employees, mum and dad shops, the local barber, if you're not supporting those businesses, what's going to happen? That's the money. So those people now, where they're going to get the money from? They have to go on to the unemployment benefits. And where's that money coming from? Okay, it's had to be raised from taxes or government borrowing. And so by a government such as like Labour at the moment, they're typically penalising success or people having the gumption to actually do their own business. They're forcing people to leave the country. It just means that those entrepreneurs or those innovators, they're leaving, and you're left with people now that still want support, which they should be looked after, but now they're becoming dependent on it. And now it's like a rat race, because now if you're getting, let's say, I don't know, £700, £800 a month for not doing anything at all because the government's supporting you, but if you were to get any job, say 15, 20 hours a week to support yourself, your benefits would reduce. What incentive is that for you to come off of those benefits? So there's no incentive at all. So once you're in that rat trap, the rat race and stuff like that, it's terrible to get out of, and it really is a trap. And so, try and avoid it. But some people, they have children, or they're getting older, or educated, or maybe they're hurt or something. They just get into that sort of. It's not by plan, they're by destiny. It just happens, and in that sort of situation, it's like a doom cycle. And I think at the moment, it's like a doom spiral going down. That the government, how are they going to fix it? I don't know. I'm not in politics. I can complain a lot. But but I'm not there. But it's a difficult situation to be in. Not very
It just struck a chord, because it just reminded me of what you said about Finland. What made you come back to the UK?
Yeah, that was because of the Brexit thing that happened. If you remember what happened, because they obviously we tried to do Brexit. Was it 2 or 3 times to happen? And then there was this doesn't happen now. No, it's going to be postponed. Okay, it's going to happen. No, it's going to be postponed. But when it did happen, they told everybody. And my great thinking, obviously being an entrepreneur mindset, I thought, if you've now got all these foreigners which are making the businesses and they're contributing, they're all leaving the UK to go back to Europe, there's going to be a vacuum in the UK. And maybe now I've coming back after 20 years of being in Finland, I've now got some experience, I've got some hustle. Maybe I can bring that experience and that that innovation and the capital that I had, I bring it back to the UK, and it'll be set, because now I can fill that void. And as we know, it didn't really work out that way. But Brexit wasn't exactly as though they planned it on the tin, and those sort of things happening. But that's the reason why. And I picked up everything, and because it's almost as if, because at the same time it was the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, is when COVID started. Because how do you cure Brexit? You just have a COVID, basically. It was like the gift horse that kept on giving. And so it's almost as if I stepped off the plane, I had COVID stuck to my shoe or something, because everything is shut down. So I had to move house from Finland to England in business class on Finnair. I had to put it all into these 25 kilo boxes. And why business class is because all the other things, it was like the same price as normal. So I thought, well, because they reduced all the prices, and because I had a residence permit for Finland, and I was British citizen, so I was allowed to travel during COVID at that time. There was no restrictions on it. I was allowed to go between. And so with that, I was actually moving house with kilos, like 25 kilo boxes between the two. And the cost was like effective. So that's a bit of a story to go for that. And again, another beer story.
Are you pleased to be back?
It's good. Actually, I am. I am, and I mean that honestly. It's like, I know some people are saying, the UK is going down, but there's opportunity here still. If your eyes are open, like for example now, if you looked on looking for a job, I know they don't have the job centres anymore, but if you were to go like Indeed, and you just say not any specific skill set, but just put onto Indeed that are just looking for a job, blah blah blah, part time, full time, there are jobs available. there is opportunity going there, and that jobs available means that there are entrepreneurs that are still here. They haven't all buggered off to Dubai or South America or whatever they're doing to try and save their taxes. There are still some people here that are doing it and trying to make their businesses work. Whereas in other countries, if you look at their jobs boards are getting very, very thin indeed. And that's where it comes to. If you're a young person, it's quite difficult to try and get on the ladder. Whereas in the UK, if you're young, it's not easy, but there's still opportunity that you can get a job to start, become a little bit independent as a young adult. Whereas in other countries, and I've seen it and experienced it, you can actually go online now and you can see what jobs are available in Germany, for example. You just log it, you can translate it easily with a plugin for your browser. There's not so many jobs available for that, and that's what I'm seeing coming back to the UK. I believe has been a good benefit, a good step to go into. Because if I'd stayed in Finland, then I'd be experiencing again that unemployment sort of stuff and the difficulties they're having there at the moment, which is not very good. Whereas in the UK, we've got the standard living crisis and that going through, but we're together, we're doing this stuff. We're not being too stupid about it. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the next budget that's happening, but at the end of the day, it's done. There's always the government can always reverse. They're quite good at that sort of thing, but they're doing their decisions. But I think at the moment the UK is obviously doing it good way. The UK globally still has quite a good reputation. Obviously, we're not the empire
I think we're still
or anything
number
like that.
five, aren't we? Number five? Number 4 or 5 in the world?
Yeah, I think
I
something
don't
like that.
think
And
we
obviously
can
for a small
complain
island, for a small island, this makes a lot of difference because obviously we're not massive. We're not like the size of America or anything. We're not Australia, massive sort of continent. We're like a little speck. We're not even very big, and yet our impact on the global stage is pretty big. And that's why I think I enjoy benefit from that. So I think coming back to the UK to answer your question has been definitely the right move.
So tell me about Station Hill Capital.
Station Hill Capital. I'll start with the origin story. Like, why did I start it? So obviously being an entrepreneur since the age of 16, even though it didn't work out so well, it's basically getting access to capital.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, exactly. But basically it's getting access to capital is the reason why a lot of companies during their startup phase fail. So once they've got over the hump where they've actually got money coming in and they can employ staff members and they get their board members and management teams, they seem to be able to tick along quite nicely. But getting to that stage where a company can go from being the sole entrepreneur to actually start becoming a team, that step is the biggest risk factor of most companies. And the phrase is very real, is that, if you have a company, most companies fail within their first 3 to 5 years. The reason they failed is not because the ideas were bad, but it's access to capital to a large extent. And so Station Hill Capital is the reason why it's created was to bridge that gap. So I'm a business finance broker specifically for businesses, and so with that business finance it means that we're able to give companies, large or small, funding when they need it when they need it. And so, for example, if you're a small company, you've run out, your bill's not going good, you've run out all the credit at your local traditional bank. Where do you go? And people seem a lot lost, and that's why a lot of companies go bankrupt. And you get lots of stress, and onto the entrepreneur, it goes crazy. And it's not only those people; you're talking about the people that could be employed or the extended families of the entrepreneur. So it affects a lot of people. Where do they go? And that's where a broker comes in, which is Station Hill Capital. So we're not got any sort of allegiance to any one lender. I've got access to over 1,000 lenders in 6 different countries. And so with that sort of thing happening, it means that, for example, if you wanted to have asset finance, or maybe you want to have some sort of working capital finance, I don't just say, okay, I'm Lloyd's Bank and I've got my product and that's what you've got and that's the rates. No, I get actually the correct vehicle, the finance vehicle for your, as the entrepreneur's specific need. So every company has a difference. Every company has a credit score that's different to the entrepreneur's credit score, but every company has a credit score. Ideally, that credit score needs to be 45 out of 100. If it's lower than that, you're going to have difficulty getting access to finance. And so what do you do then? It's like, well, you're doomed. What can you do? Sometimes you can increase your score by filing a bit earlier, maybe doing your accounts a bit better, those sort of things happening, or making some money in your company. But there's different jurisdictions there. But there are lenders which understand that. Even though they will give you the lending, it'll be a higher rate, but still you get access to finance. And that's what I do. I'm able to work with entrepreneurs over the long term, not just one deal, but over the long term for multiple deals if necessary, for the duration of their company. And so I'm able to go to different lenders to find the best source of capital for lending for that particular business at that specific time. And so I'm just going to one place and that's it, that's all I got. I'm able to give them a whole plethora of different options so that the entrepreneur is able to get to that next stage of their development and growth within the business. And that's where I'm coming from.
You you say that you're dealing with lenders in UK, Ireland, North America, Canada. Australia, and now South Africa.
Correct.
What's the difference between those geographic spreads in their sort of lending criteria? And what I've noticed in my life, but yeah, you can get business, right? No, you can get business money, but they want PGs and all this, that, and the other, which can cripple you if it goes wrong. Have you found a way of avoiding that?
Yeah. Well, it's not avoiding. You have to understand that from a lender's perspective, it's basically a guarantee that you're not going to run away with the money, and that when you get the borrowing, you're borrowing it for a real reason. So the shared responsibility, the risk is shared. So the PG is not necessarily a negative. It just means how much do you believe in the business or the deal that you're raising the money for? How much do you believe in that? Would you really put your house on the line to make it work? And that's what they're asking you for. So a PG in itself is not negative. It's actually, if you think about it, if you were to give your company stuff, you say, well, what you done, if it goes wrong, why should I give all of my money and risk 100% when you're not risking anything? So it needs to be like a 50-50, and the PG is there for that. So PG is not necessarily a negative thing for those. But when it comes to different countries and what's the difference between them and lending, what I see in the UK, for example, you can get government grants. And it's money that's already been earmarked. And so there's literally tons of money available if you know where to look. It's almost like if you know, you know. Every county in the UK has different grants specific to that county. So, for example, when you're starting a business, an entrepreneur, you just base it wherever. A lot of people, when they're starting a business and they're using a virtual office, maybe they'll put it in London, so they'll register a company in London. Whereas it could be, if they were to register it, for example, in Devon or in Cornwall or in Plymouth, or they were to go to Wales or to go to, to Birmingham, to some specific area, they may have access to grants which other parts of the country might not have access to. And so by having access to those things, it's a little bit like if you know, you know. And so that's the sort of things that I help SMEs and entrepreneurs get access to, saying, well, did you know that if your company was there, you'd get access to different funding? If you're an AI company and you're in London, you're not probably going to get many grants. But if you're an AI company and maybe you're based in Liverpool, maybe you'll get a little bit more. Or maybe you're in the middle of nowhere, Cotswolds, maybe you're going to get some other access to some funding that you wouldn't have already got. And this is already earmarked money. And it's grant money, which means you don't have to pay it back. It's not a loan. It's money that's already been earmarked for some specific reason that they can provide to you to help you get, your business going forward. And so those grant things are not necessarily available in other countries. Like, for example, just as you mentioned, I also do business in the USA, in America. They don't have a grant structure there, so you can't literally go and say, hey, I want to get some free money. America's more of a capitalistic sort of society, and so grants there is not so. At least I haven't found them yet. Maybe there is, but I haven't found anything that's available. At least with the funding sort of things I go through, is they don't offer that. But they do have things like SBA loans in America, which means it's like a friendly, low interest rate that you can get to as your company. And so they've got easier access potentially to funding for newer businesses in the US than we do in the UK. Whereas in the UK, if you've got a startup business, it's a very low barrier. If you want to get some startup funding, you can get up to 25,000 per director of the company. So if you have 4 directors, you can get 100,000 as a startup loan from the British Business Bank. And so as a broker, we've got access to these from our platforms that we're able to say, okay, this one could be available. And then this, for our marketing, we try to put it into realistic terms, because these products are available, but unless you know what term to ask or the how to ask the correct question, the answer's not there. Even though there's a lot of businesses that want to have access to money, they're not asking the correct questions to get access to that money. And as a broker, obviously I create a connection to the entrepreneur, and I try to interpret that so I can actually get them the money that they're needing to as capital, so they're able to go forward. Some of the entrepreneurs, they ask for equity investment, in which case they don't want to give it, they don't want it as a loan, they don't want it as debt. They actually just want to get investors, because obviously from a company you think, okay, if I don't have it there, I can pay it back in the future because I don't have any money now. However, using that scenario, it's very difficult to get rid of an equity partner if you don't like them. Whereas if you've got a debt, you just pay off the debt and you get rid of them. So there are different ups and downs for those. But having an equity partner, I can get those as well. It means that on a Tuesday and a Thursday, there's a pool of people that I can go to with pitch decks from a business and saying, this is what I want, would you like to invest? Usually that's for the bigger money, they're looking for like millions, etc. It's not always successful because it depends on the appetite of the investors, and they're not always the same. And so there is no like, okay, if it's this specific topic, then they're guaranteed to get money. It's not that way. It's almost like a lottery almost. And so different investors, They want different things, and we don't know what they are. So obviously going to be looking at the pitch decks at the time, and that's one way that we can also offer. It's not one of the, let's say, the big businesses we're doing, but it's an option to try and get additional funding for the bigger businesses so that they can scale from, let's say, being a 10-man company to maybe being a 25 or 50-man company with bigger aspirations of going international, etc.
You mentioned that many SMEs find it difficult to access funding. From your perspective, what's the core problem?
I think one is that they usually ask for money when they need it. They don't ask for money when they're in a good position to actually get it. So they wait too late. For example, when the company's filed its accounts and it's actually got some money in the bank, the credit score for the company is based on a month-to-month basis. Actually, it's almost like week-to-week basis. And so then's a good time actually to apply for credit so that they actually can get the allowance and get it into the bank. However, a lot of companies wait until they actually need the money because now they've got nothing in the bank, their books are late, they're doomed, and they're looking around thinking, I've got nothing else to do, in which case the books then are not looking very good. And so they're waiting way too late to ask for the credit that they could need. So it's all about leadership and the planning of a business. And in entrepreneurship, that's some of the skills that I think a lot of entrepreneurs are lacking, is that leadership that says they have to look ahead. So what's going to be the 6 month, 1 year? Obviously, they've got the best case scenario, but what's the worst case scenario? Obviously, talking like in finance terms, it's what's the full market cycle. What could happen if you go back, say, to 2007 in your sector or your industry? What's the worst case that happen? So if for example, I'm going to be a business that's selling cakes. What happens if there's a downturn? If people haven't got, I'm making it, as a business, so I'm making cakes for whatever, and so I've got my materials and those things. But what happens if, there's another COVID? How am I going to get those things going across? What could happen? So if I know to that, I need to know already that I need to have some sort of overdraft or some facility for credit in my business. So rather than trying to base my business on a month-to-month basis or customer-to-customer basis of bringing all the money in, it would be much more as a leadership role for my business if I were to have maybe a buffer of, say, £5,000 in the bank. I don't necessarily have to use it, but I now know that I can support my costs for at least 2 or 3 months if things were to go bad. And I try and apply for that when I'm actually in a good position, when my company's doing okay. And not all companies, obviously, when they're starting off, they don't have a good credit score, or maybe your company's having a bad credit score. But some lending doesn't rely on the credit score or the ratings of the directors or entrepreneurs, or even the PGs, etc. They can use that as collateralized lending. And so with the collateralized lending, it could be maybe you've got, some plant machinery. It could be like a digger, or maybe you've got a generator, and you use that as collateral. And with that, you can get between 50 and 60% of the value of that machinery as a loan over a 3 to 6 month period. And it's not going on any of the books. It's just literally they take that machinery away. It's stored, insured, and taken away for the duration of the loan period. And you get the money, and you're paying, I think, between something like 5 or 6% per month as the interest rate to get that. And at the end of the term, you're paying the whole sum back to them. But sometimes that's all you need to get over a hump, or to let's say prepare for a bad period. Because as you start putting the money in there, you're trying to get different lending to increase the positioning of your company. You're increasing the value. So that's number one that I would say entrepreneurs do badly. The second thing that they do is a lot of entrepreneurs work in the business rather than on the business. And what I mean by that is that they spend all their time making themselves a glorified job, in which case they don't necessarily have a business. They have a job. So if you're like doing a window cleaner, and you don't have lots of other people in your window cleaner business, yeah, you're a window cleaner. You've got a job as a window cleaner. It's a job. It's not a business. You might be invoicing it trying to be as a business, but you're a self-employed person. So it's not a business there. To make it as an actual business, you would then start employing others to do the window cleaning, and you'll be spending more time on the job. So you then employ a manager. You then employ a marketing guy. You then employ a sales guy that actually be doing all the stuff that you'll be doing, like trying to get new clients. You'll be trying to get the machine, the machines to do all the window cleaning. You'll be getting routes, you'll be divvying it up. So that's on a bigger scale. And that's why I see a lot of people, or a lot of entrepreneurs, they work in the business and they're really good, like a dentist or something. They're working rather than working on the business to make it an asset, which they can then use as succession to sell on to others when the time comes that they want to exit.
I think a lot of guys, when they start a business, have to work in the business. It's actually getting it to a critical mass where they can make that switch. Yeah, that can be quite difficult.
Yeah, 100%. The reason why people become an entrepreneur, I guess originally, at least I find that to be a lot of the time, is that they want to have freedom. They don't want a boss telling them what to do. They want to have the freedom to do what they want to do on their decisions, on their scales, and what they determine that's going to be the best action at that time. And so with that in basis, they also need to know that to grow their business, which is itself a legal entity, they have to do other options. Yes, they're working, in the business at the moment, but that's not the role. That's not the job. Their job is to get it to a stage where other people can start coming in as well, and it grows and develops. Because by doing that, they're contributing then to society as a whole, or their local community. They're increasing the government. They support you because obviously now you're a business, you're getting stuff done in that sort of sense, because now you're actually getting benefits. And that's why a business is taxed differently to an individual's tax. A business is taxed much differently, for the salaries and stuff going. You can get benefits from a business sort of side of things than you do as an individual. So rather than trying to cook the books to try and, or creative accounting to try and do it, I'm single employed, I'm getting the stuff going, I've got my own business. That's not the way it's intended to be. But if you follow the rules and you get to the stage that actually your business is making enough money, you can employ other people. You're now trying to make your own business to be a passive income stream. And that's the secret sauce. Once you can actually start getting that passive income stream, then you're talking about, okay, I'm going off to Dubai to live now. I'm going off to Bali. I'm doing, because now I'm getting money coming into my bank account that I'm not necessarily, working at the machine myself. Other people are doing that. And that's the aspect that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they need to get to, rather than saying, I'm going to work until I die. It's like, well, you can work until you die, but there's no necessary for that. If you can start lots of businesses, you've got experience there. If you enjoy what you're doing, that's great. But necessarily is that you don't have to work, to do that. You can give it to other people, so then you can spend, your expertise, your gumption, because not everybody's an entrepreneur. Some people would like to be, but they're just wanting something. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be one, but at least they can give it a go. So it's an opportunity that we've got options to. That I think, being in the West and in England, we're giving a huge amount of gratitude that being an entrepreneur is still seen, I think, as being okay, not demonized or anything. And so I see that as being the goals for those.
You mentioned when we spoke about the aviation roll-up. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I've got basically a business that I'm building. It's like a fund. And so that's the Atlantic Charter Aviation Group, commonly known as ACAG. And so that's the official title is Transatlantic Aviation Conglomeration. Conglomeration is a big word that maybe not everyone understands. So basically it's a roll-up. So basically what we're doing is we're buying companies in transatlantic, so it's the USA and the UK. And what we're doing with those is that we're buying things like MRO, which is maintenance, repair and overhaul businesses, FBOs, which is like fixed-base operators. You can imagine like the people that do the luggage, or the people that put the fuel into planes, or it could be the concierge services for people that fly private jets, where they hang out at their private lounges and stuff like that. So those sort of things. We also buy cargo companies, like doing the actual, with the planes and the cargo. You can imagine like DHL, those sort of things. Obviously DHL is a bit big, but as an example, like those type of companies. Private charters and those sort of things, like, the jet companies actually flying around, a bit like NetJets and those sort of stuff. Obviously a big company, Berkshire Hathaway, we're not going to buy them, but they're similar sort of styles. And so we also have got our eye on buying airports and aerodromes and airfields. And so with this, these are all big ticket items, and that's why we're raising the money. So you mentioned in the beginning of our podcast there's going to be between 50 and 60 million. Actually, it's 560 million. Not 50 to 60, it's 560 million is what we're raising. It's over a 10-year period, and so we're going to be buying 60 companies out of all those around between the two countries, between the USA and England, is 60 companies what we're going to be earmarking that we're going to be acquiring over a 7-year period. And so at the moment we're doing the fundraising, so we found some investors already, but obviously we're looking for more, and actually some people that are watching your podcast now will be interested, get in contact with us directly. And so with that's happening, but with those companies though, we're not, why would we be doing that? Where's the pain point that we're answering? Each of those companies typically would be over 10 years old. They would have some issues, for example, the motivated seller, that maybe they're getting to retirement age and they don't have a succession plan. So what do they do in that situation? Because these companies, because they're over 10 years old and they're well-run companies that have management teams there, they would also have employees. And so we're not just buying a company, we're buying the ecosystem that's there. So there's a lot of people, there's typically going to be a community around it, and we're supporting those. So we're answering a direct, let's say, ESG solution to a problem which is global at the moment between the USA and England. And so why are those two specifically? Is that at the moment the UK is a little bit depressed market, whereas the US, because of whether you like it or not, Trump's doing an okay job of bringing investment into the UK, to the United States of America at the moment. So money's flowing there, especially in the aviation sector. And so we're seeing that at least for the next 4 to 5 years, it's going to be booming in the US, whereas it's depressed in the UK, which means prices are coming down in the UK, so we're making assets here. And then at some point, it's going to flip over where the UK will start growing again, and then after the Trump presidency, who knows, but it may start to contract again. And so it's going to be the flip-flop. So between the two regions, we've got a good benefit of both sort of actions. The type of investor we're looking for is things like family offices is one sort of access, where they've got access. They're looking for the long-term multi-generational wealth, and also to PE companies like private equity. They're also looking for that big returns on initial investment. And then we're also looking for venture capital that is looking for the seed money, and they're looking for something to go for a bigger play. And so we're looking for those at the moment. So we're looking to talk to people if they're interested in those sort of things.
How do you start that fund though? You're sitting here with zero. How do you actually go about starting a fund to buy those companies before you actually have the companies to buy? How do you set that up?
Yeah, sounds good. So, for example, it's not a one-day sort of event. So I'm not really starting from zero at the moment. I've actually got quite a lot to go. I've already accomplished it. It took, I think, 1.5 years, maybe 2 years already in preparation to get to this stage. So it's not like just an idea you have on a toilet one day and that's it. Oh, I got an idea, let's raise all this money. It doesn't work that way to try and get to those. So one is that you need to have a good team around you. And so I have some of the best people in the world in my team as advisors, and also on my team of actual board members. And so some of these, they have experience of working. For example, there's a company in America called NetJets, and so from that company, it's the biggest operator in the world that does private aviation. And so it's a Berkshire Hathaway, which is part of Warren Buffett's company. So they've actually been working for those for several years as senior management positions, like VPs, etc., like really high positions in that company, and they're on our advisory board. And we have another one which is basically, he's got access on how to do access to how structuring the companies go together, how to restructure them for tax efficiencies. Again, one of the best in the world at what he does. And so with that, he's done it for like 4 billion, 5 billion, $6 billion dollar companies. They've done it before historically. So we have them on board. And then we also have M&A, that's mergers and acquisitions experts as well. And they've been doing this for many, many years of bigger deals, of this sort of level going to. So when it comes to what you need, the first thing is you have the who's to actually get your team. Because it's not a one-person thing. You can't just do it with one person. It's actually quite big. Like my business partner, Joel, basically, he's a lawyer by trade. Having somebody that knows the ins and outs of the legal compliance and stuff like that is very important. So to try and get to those stages. So that's one thing. I think it's the who's can help you to try and get this business working to the fund. Number two is actually try and get your seed investors. So the seed investors, this is somebody that believes in you enough to get the ball rolling before you've actually raised anything. And so with this one, we've actually got some seed investor at the moment that came on board. And so with that, that would enable us to actually go to events and also to pitch our pitch to go forward. We need to have something called a SIM, which is like an information memorandum about the company, right? And so the company information memorandum gives an outline of what we are planning to do and how we're planning to do it. Having that sort of terms there, we need to be able to fish it out to people. And for that, you need to go to, let's say, inside the room of special events. And that's what we were able to get to by having an initial investor that was able to get us to those events. From going to those events is then just rinse and repeat, going backwards or forwards. The actual structuring of the actual funds, obviously I'm in the UK, structuring those things, it's not that, it's going to be a US fund. That's done by a dedicated team that actually that's what they do. So again, you outsource what you can't do and you do what you can do. Like myself, I'm finding people that might be able to do the investing, but I'm not going to do the investing myself. There's some regulations that you need to be following, those sort of things. But what I can do is I can connect them to the people that do have the paperwork that can do that. And so you can't take on too much. And that's where it comes to. Where do you start from? You don't start from zero. You have to build that team around you to get to the stage where you actually have a project, you have a product that's going to be making a business, and you have the vision of where it's going to go. And when you do those, you also have to have the end or the exit in mind at the same time. Because everyone's going to ask you, okay, if this all works, what's the exit? Where people to get? Where's the off-ramp? And so by having those in place and what it works, which locality or which domain would be good for doing those. You can have multiple exits during the business growth cycle, for example. Our plan is over 10 years, so we have a hard stop potentially in 10 years, but there's flexibility to have smaller exits in the run up to that. And so whether it's going to be IPO in the meantime and those sort of things, they're all options which we discussed, excuse me, we discussed with the investors at that time. So I don't want to make it blasé. I just made it. And it's very complex. You have to have the right people around you at the right time, and they all give guidance and to get it there. But doing it alone, it's going to be. I've never done that alone. It's going to be very, very difficult to try and do that. But if you try and ask for guidance, you can even go to ChatGPT or something to help you out in the beginning, and it'll tell you the sort of things to happen. In the US, the structures are a lot easier to set up than it is, for example, in the UK. In the US, the structure is like a GPLP, that's a general partner and limited partner structure. It's very well documented. You can get it all over the place. And that's the easiest structure. So that's why when our fund's being created, it's typically being US made and managed, rather than trying to do it in the UK. So from my side, even though I'm based in the UK, I'm here, my involvement of the actual fund establishment and that is quite minimal. The most of it is being done in the US because they get the stuff done for them there. So there are these pros and cons. I'm pretty sure it can be done in the UK, but I'm just not the expert for that. I've never done it in the UK.
Sure. Well, how many proactive partners like you are there? I know you've got a great board.
Yes.
But how many guys working like you are on it?
Yep. At the moment, we've got 5. That's working the same as what I am at the moment, and so we have 3 main owners, and then we have 2 like support ones like legal and with accounting and stuff like that, like CFOs, etc. So that's what we're doing as the main core team, and then extra to that is the advisory board and consultants, etc. we bring on board.
And lastly, what made you choose aviation?
Aviation, to me, it was a secondary thought, because originally I was thinking about, okay, it could be let's say the engineering, construction. That was the first option I was thinking about. Another one was HVAC. And then I had another one which was like for mobility and transportation. For those. But I was thinking, if I go for each one of those, they're quite specific in themselves. They've got their own lane. Whereas if you're in aviation, it covers everyone. It's the whole gamut. If I have aviation, I've got hangars, okay, and then you've got air conditioning in the hammer, okay. Maybe you've got the aeroplanes, okay. You've got the transportation of all the stuff going on, actually on the airfield. You've got machinery, you've got products, you've got, it covers everything. So aviation is almost like a catch-all for all the other industries that I was thinking about going into. And plus I was interested, because obviously going back to the first story is that how do I get girls, when I was like 16, 17 years old, going to the airport, I got a fascination with aircraft. I always been a pilot and those sort of things back in the early days. I don't have a license now, but I used to before I didn't use it. You have to keep it in compliance every year. I wasn't able to keep it compliant. But at that time I did get a fascination of flying above the clouds and in a small GA, like general aviation, small aircraft like a Cessna, etc. I thought that was very, very, that was my place, my peace place. I really did enjoy that. And then as I got older, like flying around like internationally, I like flying private. I was recently in Cannes, for example, and it's nice to just say, okay, I'd like to go from Monaco to Cannes. You just jump on the helicopter and just take the trip. It takes like 15 minutes, it's done. And I like doing that sort of thing. So aviation, I do like it. I like the people that are in that sort of sector. It does make, I wouldn't say like turns me on, but it gets me excited about talking about aviation aspects. Where's aviation going to? Talking about eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, because always the discussion then goes to like drones and those sort of things. So aviation as a whole, it's so large, and you could talk about it. So many interesting people, and the stories they tell. It's like you can understand, like in the Second World War, if you're a pilot, you're like God sort of thing. Even in the UK, if you're a pilot, it's someone, they have that standing. And to me, aviation is a fascinating space to be into. Not only the flying, but also the actual creation of the aircraft, maintaining the aircraft, the whole support structure. How do you get the stuff going? If a customer's buying a ticket, how do they get from A to B? It's all interesting sort of subject. I could talk for hours on it.
Just moving on then a little bit. That is very interesting to me. I mean, I've heard of a conglomeration before. I mean, obviously, it's a roll up of different companies into an IPO. I think it's quite a hard process to achieve, but I know he's getting done out there, and there's a few in existence. As your background as a developer has matured, and you mentioned when we spoke that you built your own AI stack. Tell me about what sort of AI is being used in your business and how you approach it with a new age?
Okay, interesting question. So, first of all, it's not been my first attempt. I've tried so many times and failed. AI is not like I just rate it and it's done, you got AI. And another thing is that AI actually is not a thing. It's a bunch of other things that make the AI subject. So it's not like AI is a thing. It's either like machine learning and extra. There's lots of other terms that go to it, but in the big catch-all of AI. So, for example, my own tool stack is that I use as let's say the automation engine is I use a product called N8N. So I use that as my automation. I then have another product that I use on those as a back end. I can either use ChatGPT using the API or use Grok. I can use those as well, or another like chat service that I use. But if I'm using the APIs, I like to use ChatGPT with the API service on there. Mostly, I'd get to those. I have developed my own API internally, my own LLM, that I've actually been able to train myself. But that's like internalized because I coded it in Rust because I'm a developer. So it's a different language. So I made that myself, and that was just using pattern recognition. I wouldn't advise everybody to create their own LLM if they needed to. I just did it as an exercise to say, because I could. I just did it that way. But would I do it again? Probably not. Is it a product that I'm going to sell to other people? Nope. And so some of the reasons why I think that's bad is because I went down the rabbit hole and I didn't know where to stop, and everything became a shiny object. And so you can waste your time doing lots of stupid stuff that you didn't have to, when you can just get something off the shelf that fits the ticket easily done, and so without all the costs. So when it comes to like LinkedIn, for example, I tried to do some automation and using AI on LinkedIn to try and source leads. I tried to go out there and those sort of things, but it didn't work. And why it didn't work is because it wasn't authentic and it came across as a bit too robotic. And so, for example, if I'm talking to somebody and they comment back, oh, my son's died or something, or my daughter's dog's died, and then you come back, oh, that's great, wonderful, let's make an appointment for next Wednesday. It's not really on point. And so you have to train the AI for what it's going to be about, the sentiments exactly. So now what I use a hybrid model where I'm using AI plus humans. And the humans, I'm using them as consultants, not as employees. I use them as consultants. Consultants because I can raise and lower when I want to, and I can get specialists for specific areas that I need to. But with that, it means that now I'm using real people to interact with other real people. Mostly I do it myself still, but if I'm going to be outsourcing it, then I use real people to actually do the outsourcing for those sort of things. Like if I'm hosting an event, for example, I have humans to do that. But the tasks are actually more robotic and more repetitive, then I try and put that into an N8N tool stack, whether it's going to be creating lead generation forms, etc. I'm also using tools such as 11 Labs, where I'm doing automation over voice. And so with that, it's creating also the agentic bots where you're using MCPs, which is like a control program for those, where you're able to make it do additional features. You can get those sort of additional features to do extra tasks. Maybe it could be making a calendar event or something, or maybe you're going to a separate database to make a different inquiry. So by having that, it means that now you've got at the bottom of the page on some websites, you can now talk to somebody rather than typing in a prompt saying, hey, I need some help. You can actually push the button and you can talk to somebody, and that's becoming more common because as people using their mobile telephones, etc., they actually want to talk to somebody. And with the 11 Labs at the moment, it's almost as if you're talking to a human because people want to talk to humans and get it across. And that's my tool stack at the moment. It's like 11 Labs, N8N, whether it's going to be some of the popular like OpenAI, for example, or Gemini, is using those sort of tools to get to those with the with not only used my own GPTs, but also to the API accesses, if that answers the question.
Fantastic. I mean, do you recommend AI to people in the finance industry?
It's coming, and I recommending AI. I think getting an understanding of what AI is a fundamental, but it doesn't take long. You can do that in an hour. Like, what is AI potentially going to? Why would you use it to get AI? Because ChatGPT is not AI. It's a wrapper. It's an interpreter. That's what it's about. And AI, you need to know the limitations. Like, for example, AI is based on human existing accomplishment. If the AI, as you're training an AI, it has to be already created. So, for example, if you've got pictures of Picasso and you put it into the AI now knows what Picasso pictures are. But if you asked it without knowing that, it says, I want you to create me a new genre that no one's ever seen before, it will struggle a little bit with that unless it's trained on those specific models. So when it comes to innovation and completely whole new technologies, AI would, at this moment, it will struggle at those sort of things. And so when you're in finance and you're trying to look for some solutions, you need to know that if it's looking at repetitive data that you're doing all the time that can be automated, automation, you could think of that as being the AI you go to. That's as far as you need to go. You don't need to think about the next big thing. That's what I think should be in finance, because finance is very serious. There's no joking around. It's not like, okay, I can push a button and it makes a funny sound sort of thing. That's, you don't need that in finance. You want to be 100% guaranteed secure that you're getting the numbers you need to. It's very robotic. So that's where it could be used. For example, I use AI in my own business so that if I have a company name, I'm able to use the website for the company and also the past 3 years financial records, which I can get from Companies House, for example. I'm able to then to make a complete insight report for that company to say what potential facilities I could offer them as lending. And so because it's all public knowledge, because that's why businesses, a lot of them are transparent, at least in the Western world and the UK specifically, what I'm talking about now, that there's a lot of this information you can get there. So I'm using AI tools for that. If I were to do that myself, which I was historically doing, I have to go to those individual places like to Companies House, download it, then I have to put that data into an Excel sheet. From the Excel sheet, then I have to take the information out to put it then into either like a Google Doc or something. I can put it into there to then create the presentation that I want to do. Now I can just push a button with those things that have been created, and I can create the report a lot quicker. So that's how AI can be used, but it's not going to be there saying, okay, I want a whole new financial model that I can work with. It's not going to do that for you. So the limitations. So to answer your question specifically, AI in finance, yes, but more as an automation tool rather than being some sort of whiz-bang, latest generation sort of innovation sort of product. I don't think finance is the place for that, to be honest. That's my personal opinion.
Cool. Looking forward, we've been speaking for an hour already. Looking forward, where do you see Station Hill Capital in the next 3 years?
I would like to have it so that Station Hill Capital, that we have a number, like a larger management team. So, for example, like CEOs, etc. With that happening, and dedicated sales staff, I'd like that to happen. Obviously, being multi-destinational, for example, in the UK, specifically at the moment, like in London, I've got offices. I would like to have an office, for example, in the US, maybe around New York or so. I think that'd be quite nice to have those, like in a 3-year sort of projection going forward. For that, it just means that we've got local presence. We're able to do that with a local team, etc. I'd also like to sort of try and maybe establish my own licensing, so I'm able to give my own private lending as well. I'd like that to be established as well at some point. And as we're sort of building the team out, so I'd like to sort of try and go to more countries. For example, I do know there's a lot of opportunity in Africa, and so being able to offer facilities to African countries could also be quite good, because the reason Africa I see it as being a benefit for the future is, one, they have the largest population, which is youngest in the world. So that means in the future, that's where people are going to come from, is from Africa, because as the aging populations of the Western world and for Asia and the Middle East, they're going to be needed people to actually do work and stuff, and that's for Africa at the moment. Number two is that there's still a huge amount of development work that can be done in Africa from the foundational level, which means that investments at the moment in Africa will have a higher return. Whereas if you're trying to do, let's say, some sort of development in London, you're building on something that's already been there. Building in the UK, you're just building extra infrastructure. Whereas in Africa, that infrastructure, it can be placed there. So you're going to be the first one potentially there, that others then have to follow your model, in which case that gives you a market advantage. And then the third one is that I think that Africa at the moment, because it's still a little bit like unknown, or they feel like, it's unsafe, it's changing. And so, for example, there's a lot of people from Dubai, which is getting expensive for people to live. They're actually spending a lot of their time in Kenya, and then they're going back to Dubai for the meetings, etc., because those flights are happening. And I think this internationalization of Africa being a hub where people can live and work as we start becoming, let's say, digital nomad sort of ideology, I think, and having the manufacturing and the resources done in Africa may be the future to go. So that's why I'm seeing that maybe some African lending or some African sort of insight to the business. I can see that sort of coming. That's the sort of plan for the next 3 to 5 years, I guess.
I think when you talk about Africa, you're on the right topic, because I've spoken to many entrepreneurs and some people who run some very, very big organisations, and they're all focused on Africa.
Yeah, I can see that, because the issue at the moment, though, that obviously you don't have some viewers now. So, oh, Africa! I've got a business in Africa. I have a business in Africa. I have a business that's registered in Kenya. Specifically, it's like a virtual assistant company. And so, but with that, the problem is though, is that when they ask for money, say, okay, I've got an African business, I want to have some money now. It's getting access to that money is very, very difficult at the moment. So we still need to have some, like we've been doing in the Western world, like now I'm in 6 countries, having access to those lenders which believe that, okay, this is going to be a solid investment, we're able to get our money back, it's trustworthy, transparent, etc. This is where it's going to be like the Wild West for a little bit, but I think this is where the profit's made. This is where the opportunity lies. And it will come there, just that we have to be the first movers to try and get to those. And it's a whole new world. So, for example, we're complaining in the UK at the moment about taxes and blah, blah, blah happening. But it's okay, well, we could always say, okay, I want to buy 10 acres of land in the middle of nowhere, Kenya, for example, and it's going to cost me, I don't know, £10,000, and then I could rent that land out to a local Kenyan, like a farmer, to make me watermelons or something, or some pineapples, and the pineapples are then sold to Mr. Del Monte, and then Mr. Del Monte will then sell it to Tesco's, and then it comes back to me as a shopper. So there's opportunities that are all over the place, but in England we think, only our own little thing, but you can actually buy land in other countries as an investor, and you're earning a monthly return, which could be passive at the end of the day. And so opening these up, but we still need to get that access to people and access to the funding and those sort of things happening.
So if people need your help for funding, if they want to actually invest in your aviation project, how do they get hold of you?
Yeah, so for either of those,
Well,
the easiest way...
find you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is to reach out to me on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn handle is David Gelkin Investor, with a hyphen between the two, right? So it's David Gelkin Investor. So that's the easiest way to contact me. If you want to go for the business lending, then that's at stationhillcapital.com. And so from there, if you put it through, then it come through to me as well on those. And the typical thing is somebody wants to make an application. I almost always talk to the people, because everyone wants to chat about their business, okay? But always I need to have some information about the company. So there's something called a pre-qualification form on the website. You just fill in the basic information, like who your name, your telephone number, a little bit about the business number, like the ID number of the business, what your recent turnover's been, how much are you looking for, what's the use of the funds, and then with all the applications, usually between 6 months to 1 year's business accounts, and then also the statutory accounts would also be helpful. And if you're looking for longer term sort of lending, you've got some already, then maybe a list of creditors that you've already, like a lending that you've already got, and who they are and where you're at, the aged lending and those sort of things would be very good. So apart from that, it's pretty straightforward. But yeah, reach out to me on the website, stationhillcapital.com, or reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic, David. Well, I want to thank you for doing this podcast with me. I think it's been one of my more interesting ones. I've learned a lot today, and it's been entertaining. For listeners, I want to thank you all for listening in to Wise Tech for Wise Money. Once again, I'm Gary Wayne, A1 Solutions International. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can contact me via my email, gary@A1solutionsinternational, SINTL.com. For further information. Thank you very much, David. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. And thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. It's David.